This is part of something I've done over the past year or so for ballet school, specifically around Batok, the tattooing. So there's some people here that probably don't know me, so I'm going to go a real quick intro. So we already did this. We know where y'all watching from, all over the U.S. and some in the world in Amsterdam. But, we have many, different places. We're all different intersections, in here in the diaspora. Okay, so a little bit about my story. I guess my first foray into identity was during elementary school, where we had to do a family tree, and they gave us some chart like this with all these blank spaces, and it was a big tall tree, and basically my classmates, some of them were able to go back to like the 17th century. Some even had photos. But then for me and the other classmates of color, like we didn't have a tree like theirs. We had a bush. And so the bush was basically my grandparents, my dad and the titas, because they didn't even either A, want to talk about things, or B, they forgot, or there's, some trauma that was there. So it was a lot like pulling teeth. And, I just found out it can take like 20 years just to find out some information. So that's kind of what got me curious, like, about our culture. So the first thing I remember going through these history books, was this capital I, what I thought it was at the time. This is the Katipunan flag. Later I learned that it was a Ka, our first, our indigenous writing system. And so after high school, I went to the Philippines to, find myself and that whole nine, but I ended up staying in the Philippines for 10 years to go to school, work, and play. And one of the first places that I found or discovered was in the malls at the time, National Bookstore. And what's kind of sad now, though, is National Bookstore doesn't really sell any more Philippine history books. It is sad that what's called National Bookstore doesn't have them anymore. But at the time when I was there, I picked up some books and I found some basic information, some charts, about the script, things like that. And then I went online and I found this guy, Paul Morrow, who I talked about like history about the Philippines and specifically around the script. I thought he was Filipino, but ended up he was a white guy living in Canada, in Calgary. I had no idea. I thought that, his last name's Morrow. I thought it's Morrow like in Mindanao, but I was wrong. But I started blogging in the Philippines about being an amboy. That's what my cousins called me. And as an amboy, we would go to bars in Makati, in the city. And I remember they would call over people. Well, not people. I would say they would call over girls to the table. Like, hey, my cousin from America can write your name in the old writing. And then, what's your name, Nikki, or whatever. And I would write on a napkin. I probably got a lot of it wrong back then because I was still new. But that was my first experience of like, oh, there's something within this cultural practice that has like value. Then, of course, after I graduated college, because I spoke English, people suggested I work at a call center. And I said, nope, I don't want to work at a call center to get yelled at by Americans. So I left the Philippines, came back to America. But at the time where my parents were living, they were living in Tracy. If some of you know that, I'm here in California. There's a lot of cows and buffets over there. And the only job that I can get was working at a call center. So I left the Philippines to escape a call center to only work at a call center. And so not making a lot of money, being kind of sad and depressed, first thing you do is either A, cut your hair, or B, get a tattoo. So I got a tattoo. And this is from Alex Figueroa. At the time, I think this was this was in Union City. He was traveling around, but we talked about the script and, talked about patterns and things like that. And it was the first time that I had like a conversation with someone about tattooing from a tattoo artist that was, had some cultural knowledge. Because stupidly, like my first tattoos I got, I thought it was going to be like those Miami Ink TLC shows where they tell you the story, you tell their story, and but they really didn't give a shit. It was just like, all right, roll up your sleeve. Where do you want it? Buzz, buzz, buzz. Put on headphones, and then you're done in a couple hours. So this was quite refreshing. And then so from that conversation with Alex, I thought about like, okay, well, let me talk about this tattoo. And so I started posting on MySpace and Friendster about the writing and tattooing in general. And, that's where I met some like-minded individuals that I'm still friends with to today, and I'll talk about later. And then so I started PinoyTattoos.com specifically just to break it down, because at that time, the social media didn't really have a good way to converse with people. But people were reaching out to me asking like, how can you translate my name? My father was Filipino, or I grew up not knowing much about the Philippines, or I married a Filipina. I want to learn more about her culture. These were like all these common themes. And that's when I learned that, okay, well, it's deeper than this material thing that I was doing. There's a search and need. There's a hole somewhere there. But then I didn't want it to only be around about tattooing. So I started bybain.com to talk about more of the socioeconomics of the writing. And that's when I started to use these terms, pre-Filipino, pre-Philippines, just to kind of get a response from people, because they weren't responding to like pre-Hispanic, pre-colonial, but when I said pre-Filipino, pre-Philippines, it was much more visceral. And so I was still at that dead-end job, and I thought, well, what if I put learn how to put a PayPal donation link on my website? Would anyone pay for this? So I put it up there for $5. I woke up the next day, and then I was surprised. Oh, crap. Someone will actually pay for this? And that's when I learned that, okay, there's economic value. So there first was the cultural value. Second was like the social value, like at the bars where people were interested in it and kind of, give you that light. And then 3 was this economic value. And then from there, I started concentrating more on artwork and people commissioning me to do their artwork for tattoos. And so I did a lot of artwork, got invited at the Asian Art Museum to do this big piece that went viral. And people started asking me, hey, can you paint live? And I thought, well, why would you want to watch me paint live? That's hella boring. It's literally watching paint dry. And so, but what happened was after, because I was a tagger, so you got to paint fast before the 5-0 comes. So, but the value was after, I would talk hours to people about the writing, about culture, and learning their stories. So this was more of a vehicle for the greater need of the community. But I still continued to do bigger pieces around the Bay Area, and then traveled around the country doing talks about the script. So some of the projects I've been working on, books, this graphic novel last year. Oh, latest book, Little Mamba Batok, is coming. Oh, it ends tomorrow, the pre-sale. But this is a kid's Batok book that's coming out. It'll come out in April. And we have clothing. I get commissioned or taken in as a consultant. This is from Island Pacific, the food grocery chain. These are their new stores in LA where they use the script, and they just wanted like a cultural consultant to make sure they were doing things right. And these are around here in San Francisco, Soma, Pilipinas, for any cultural district. So I consult and work with other artists so that they can add these cultural elements. Because when you enter a cultural district, it should visually look different. Because you get that when you go to Chinatown, Japantown, Little Ethiopia, things like that. This is in LA. In the middle says Isang Bagsak. That's in Filipino town. So the Batok journey. All right, Batok journey starts here in 2010 at the first International Babaylan Conference. And, that's why when I see someone, typing in like from Sonoma or in that area, because that's where all of this started, with all the, like Tita Lenny Strobel and all the women up there. I owe all of this to them for the Center of Babaylan Studies, because it wasn't, if it wasn't for them, then I wouldn't have met this dude. Some of you may know. So this is a young Lane Woken that I met. We would be chatting before on MySpace, and then I remember we said, hey, you're going to this conference, let's meet up. So we met up there. And from then on, the next conference and so forth, and I'm fast forwarding that, I started hosting him when he would travel to the Bay Area. And then just, we would go around, tattoo people, help stretch. And I kind of, didn't want to learn. I was just, no, let me just, hang out because we have common friends and things like that. But one day at my house, he saw a tattoo machine because I was going to use a tattoo machine to create some artwork on watercolor paper. And he said, well, why don't you make a Batok tool? Because I was already making tools made out of carabao horn for calligraphy. And he mentioned that there were old tools that were made of carabao horn, but we don't make them anymore. So I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. So I made a tool and I started to use it in artwork. And this is a different path than what the newer students are going through today. But we didn't know what we were doing. We were just looking for companions in the practice, I would say. And so I would, if someone wanted the script as a tattoo, I would draw on their arm with a Sharpie, and then Lane would tattoo. And he would say, see, look, you could do this. But for me, at that time, I was kind of like, well, why don't you just go to a machine artist? So I didn't quite fully develop my thought process around it yet, but I could see that there was potential. So then we do talks all the way around the country. We were like, I was like his opening act. We were like an 80s band. So we had our greatest hits. I would talk about the script. He'd talk about tattooing. So we travel around. We'd look awkward on TV together. And, then, eventually I started to, well, let me try it. So, so here we are today. All right. If y'all have any questions, please type them in the chat, and then I'll come back to them. All right. So, and that's where Lane and I, we co-founded with Ray Haguisan, the Katao Living School of Living Traditions. And so this is a loose-knit organization because, we had to have a name for our gang, I guess, so that's what we called it. All right. So who here has had a Batok ceremony? Clap hands or something, or, yeah, I see. We got quite a few. All right. Cool. All right. So a little bit about history. Las Islas de los Pintados in Spanish means like the island of the painted people, is one of the things that, the early names, I don't know if it's a name, but that's what they called the people that they saw. And, it's very descriptive. So island of the painted people kind of has a nice ring to it. And so this is from the Boxer Codex, one of the famous images around tattooing that we have, and these are of Visayans. And if you look at the way that their patterns are, you'll see that, let's focus on the butt. And the butt, you'll see like there's like these circles and what looks like a flower. You see these patterns in the back of the thighs, the top of the hands, on the chest, the cheeks, all over. And in design school, there's a saying that if something is repeated, it then stresses importance or something to remember. So these are some of the this is the earliest documentation of the tattooing practices in the Philippines. Then this is Apo-ono. And so Apo-ono is a mummy that's around, I think, 700 years old, has been carbon dated, and it's from the Benguet province in the northern Philippines in the Cordilleras. So there's proof of our tattooing practices, go back a long time ago. Yes, 1,000 years old. And then this is a recent picture of that was commissioned by the Philippine government to have a more accurate photo or a depiction of Lapu-Lapu, because he is an older man, and you can see that the tattoos there are similar to those at the Boxer Codex. So there's different names of, we use Batok, I think, because Batok is more of a popular like umbrella term. But there are different names for the action of tattooing. in the Philippines. There's Batok. It depends on the language. Batok, batek, batik. There's pangateb. There's tatak, burik, patik, etc. And they all describe the action of like poking, scratching, hitting. So that's what those terms mean. So let's talk a bit about patterns. And this is one of the artifacts from the Arku cave that was found. And you'll see that it's a humanoid figure. And I think it was on the top of a pot. And you'll see that the patterns on the back and on the arms, they mirror, and on the butt, they mirror what you saw on the Boxer Codex. In here, it looks like they're circles. So we don't know exactly if they were circles or if it was just that the way that the pot was created, that the circles were used. Maybe there was a function to have it, maybe for grip, since this was a handle. But you can see the lines and the directions of the patterns on the body. So a lot of these patterns, they are also on material culture. And the way that, because we don't have that much documentation, and that's one of the frustrating and challenging things, is where people will expect, well, what book can I buy? And it'll say like, this pattern is this, and this pattern is this, and people make those on Etsy, and you'll see them on, if you go to Google Images, you'll see them. They'll say Visayan flower and this, but it lacks a lot of historical context. And so the way that we study, it is a lot of investigation. So we do know that tattoo patterns were not just on the body, but they were on material culture. And so, for example, in this pottery, but you want to ask, like, what was that pottery used for as well? What direction? Where was it from? What ethnic group? And you see these are bamboo tubes from the Chicago Field Museum. These are lime containers or betel nut, and you see all the patterns all around. And then, of course, the textiles as well. So the patterns that we know of are derived are mainly from these material cultures. There's because there's not that much documentation like that one from the Boxer Codex. We have our recent documentation up in the Cordilleras with some books, but other than that, like, we don't have anything for, like, say, the Tagalog people, the Bicolanos. We just have descriptions. But what did survive is the material culture. Like these ones specifically, like these are from Pangasinan, where my father's from. There's gold artifacts that were found there, and you'll see that these patterns are similar to what are tattooed in other areas within the Philippines. So you see like the diamond shapes, and then you can kind of guess or triangulate, like, okay, what were these instruments used for? What were these shapes? What was their belief system? What was their creation story? And is it similar to those up north or south with the minor differences? So you can kind of sort of figure things out if you look at those multiple fonts. Okay, so then as we know that this is like a map of the travels of from the Philippines in and out of the South China Sea all the way down through Micronesia, Polynesia. And so the culture, one can argue that a lot of the culture within the tattooing, not just tattooing, but linguistically, jump-started off from the Philippines. And that could be controversial to say. I get it. All right, so tools. So another this on the top left, you'll see the Arku cave. So this is, 1500 BC, and you'll see the shapes. They all kind of look similar. If you look at the other teeth from, look at these ones from Aotearoa on the bottom, and then in Tonga. So all of these were used for tattoos, and they all have a similar shape. And they were combs. These are examples of individual needles. So they were either like thorns or they were bone that were made into like needles. Because remember, we're like a maritime culture, so we would make fish hooks And so the techniques would cross over into the tattooing and fishing. Look at the ones in the bottom, the Philippines. And I think then there are some later examples where when the Americans were in the Philippines, then we had access to metal like sewing needles. So these are modern recreations of those tools. These ones are mine. Okay, so Filipino tribal tattoos. Let's get into it. So when I first started to kind of explore this is kind of like what I saw, this style with a Philippine sun and, these wavy patterns and, looks cool. But then later I learned that, these were kind of a hodgepodge of things. So this is something that Lane did to kind of break down what some of these meant. So you'll see like this, you have patterns from Samoa, Hawaii, and then Philippines, and then you have stuff that, that's frankly just made up. But there's a Philippine star. And that kind of gave birth to that idea of like, oh, Filipinos are always copying Polynesians. And, anywhere online, you'll see that, But if it wasn't for Wang Od, we would probably still be having that argument. But because she's become a worldwide celebrity, then it kind of puts all those to rest. But it still comes up once in a while. There's still that there's that Filipino style that's very popular. But that rides onto the never-ending topic of like, are Filipinos Asian, or Pacific Islander, and I don't want to get into that. That's another topic. But are Polynesians Filipino? So that's another argument to the other side. Or what are the cultural sharings that one can say there? Okay. All right. So we have to talk about Apo. We can't talk about this practice without talking about her. Okay, so most of you know who she is. And what's interesting, I was at an event last week in San Jose State, and I had like a copy of the Vogue magazine. And then this dad was teaching his daughters, like they were like, oh, look, this is the old lady from the Philippines who tattoos. And then the daughters were all, oh, well, that's cool, Dad. Would you get one? And he said, oh, no, it's only for white people. And I said, what? And then he said, oh, that when I watch on YouTube, that's all I see. So then what's interesting is that he bases knowledge based on like, the vloggers and stuff on YouTube, not knowing that, yeah, this is something that is, part of our culture as a whole. But when you go up to Buscalan, you'll see that they have these flashcards, these laminate cards of like, all right, this is what you can do, you can pick, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of them, they are though based on Lane's book when he went up there in 2009. And so what's interesting is that a lot of the patterns that they have, and let me go back into that other one here, they're not 100% Kalinga, or they're not even from the Philippines. So the cultural sharing of like this book or made its way to the Flash. So, and one can argue that, okay, well, it's cultural sharing. And then one can argue that, okay, it's kind of like what's that movie, Back to the Future, where like you enter this place and then you kind of interrupt the timeline, but then out comes a new culture. And over the time, it's been over 10 years. So, you can say, okay, what creates a tradition? It's time. And is 10 years enough to do that? So these are some of those. Like that one on the one on the right, I think that's God is greater than my highs and lows. So that is something that is newly created by the community up there. And the way that they work up there is that there's like a circle of elders that get to choose, like, okay, if we're going to add something on the chart, we have to talk about it. And they're even doing like some of the script as well up there. So this is the 3 dots from Apa Wang Od that her and her grandnieces do. But let's go back into this chart again and zoom in on traditional. So like what is traditional? Because Now, if you go up there, all of these markings have been traditional, even though like this, was that love, faith, hope, and love, that wasn't done there. That wasn't traditional. I met the person that did the half sun and moon designs, that was just a few years ago. So I think that when people go up there, they don't know. I mean, but then it's up to the Kalinga people to decide like what they want to put on people's bodies. So like they have their own domain. Because I've seen like some more academics and say that, oh, this isn't traditional, but like, well, give it time and it will be. But what was fascinating when I went there was witnessing firsthand like this, the Apawangod economy. When you go up there, you see the signs of the tattoo village. And what's interesting is that, well, now there's a bridge, so you don't have to walk down the ravine and walk back up. There's a bridge to walk through. It literally is a village, and there's over 100 plus women that tattoo there on the weekends mostly. And what's happened was that then, they don't have to go to Manila or to Baguio or to the city to, work some crappy job. They go to school during the week, and then they go home on the weekends to tattoo the tourists, and, that helps them pay for their schooling. So they're creating economic security for themselves. And this is where Apo tattoos down in like an open area where people are waiting. And it is kind of a zoo, especially on the weekends. There's a whiteboard with names, and you have the guides bringing you in. It is really something to witness. And then her family, then they have a souvenir shop as well. So, you have the souvenir shop. After you get tattooed, you can get the magnets and, the T-shirts and even the coffee. So, they're doing well. But, and I saw this too, actually, when I was there. There was someone getting a tattoo, and then they, people give her gifts all the time, like people, give her a Steph Curry jersey, or she has a lot of makeup. She likes, red lipstick from Sephora. People give her that. But some like then go up there and try to be opportunistic, where they, hey, could you promote my brand? And let me make some shirts about you. Let me create hats, things like that, or some shoes. So there are folks that will try to take advantage of this economy. Then there's issue of like of exploitation. This was a few years ago at a creative festival in Manila, where they were put on platforms, and some people were thinking like, oh gosh, that's kind of like very human zoo-ish, on display behind the ropes and tattooing people. There was also a Nas Daily created as like an online master class course, and there's controversy that she was part of this and, didn't approve or anything like that. And basically, so I took it out of curiosity, and it was basically like these people, Manila people, saying like, okay, it was well shot in videos and good interviews and things like that. But it was basically like, oh, here's how she makes her tools. She gets the thorn, puts it in a bamboo. There's, things that you can find on YouTube already. And then you have your exercise on design your own tattoo. So it's kind of, kind of corny, and I get it, and then at the end you get a certificate. I got a certificate at the end, but then they got it taken down because of these issues. But, so these are the sort of things that you kind of see up there. So a little bit about my practice before we get into Q&A. I like to say that like your practice belongs to you, like my practice belongs to me, but the whole practice as a whole does not belong to me. Meaning like, all right, you do your own, I'll do my own, and that's fine. Because sometimes sometimes people feel like, oh, because you do this traditional way, then, oh, you must hate machine tattoo artists, or you must hate modern things or things like that. But no, not really. It's just that we're trying to correct the imbalance. Like literally, there's only a handful of us that do this, and then there's like, I don't know, 1,000 or that do the machine Filipino stuff, and that's fine too. But if we're trying to normalize or bring back this practice, there has to be more of us. So what I do in terms of the script, like the calligraphy style, I don't do. I separate it out. I try to approach the work where it is like how it's scratched on bamboo, how it was originally written. This is from the Mangyans in Mindoro. That's still right. And you'll notice it's much more angular. And so I mimic that on the body, treating it as bamboo. And so on the left, I would consider artwork. On the right would be a cultural practice. Same thing for here. So left is art, right is the practice. And it could be kind of confusing, but that's just kind of how I like to separate those things. And I say, like, because in art, there's no boundaries. In a cultural practice, there are boundaries. There has to be boundaries, because otherwise it'll just become artwork. But culture is fluid. Things can change. And, just within the past 10 years or so, even with us, things have changed, but the change is slow. And I think that's the way it should be. All right, so the 3 pillars, just to review again, one is that they are, it's in ceremony. And when I say in ceremony, like what is the intent of this tattoo? Is it just ornamental to look fresh? Is it for something that you're going through, something that you achieved, or are you in mourning? Are you welcoming someone? What is that intent? And then intent can manifest into like a physical, like altar space, which some folks have done. But usually, with a food offering, in Ilocano atang, Tagalog alay, halad in Bisaya, and it could be favorite food of whoever this is dedicated to. It could be Jollibee. We've had it all. So whatever is appropriate or what you feel for your ceremony is. And then the markings are based on lineage. So it's like, where are you from? Where are you really from? And I think that's the question. The key is like you have to try to find out. But some of us don't know. We may have been disconnected, or through adoption, or there's some trauma there, or family doesn't want to talk about it, and that's okay. I mean, the effort is trying to find out. And I think between the stories, from relatives, or some general research of, say, you have a unique last name and they're somewhere up, say, north, between that and maybe like a DNA test, maybe we can somehow, get to that middle ground. And that's where I'm a fan of, like, or let's start with something small, maybe like not a whole big piece from your shoulder to your wrist. Maybe we'll just start with a small inner stripe first, and then when you find out more, then we can add to it. And then what's your connection to our people? Some folks have asked, like, well, what if I'm not Filipino? I'm only a quarter Filipino, or this. Well, it's all right. Well, what's the connection? Is there a connection? And then the third one is like 100% tapped by handmade tools. And so all the tools that we use are hand tapped and made. So that means no machine, no flash, no stencils, all hand drawn. This is Francis. I think Francis is here. So all hand drawn. And most of the time we use a stretcher. And to me, like a stretcher, this is Iggy, who helps stretch with me. To me, a stretcher is important because, like, for what we do, it's not just for the sake of doing it, like as a business, or just to, beautify people, or, find ancestors and things like that. But it's also to keep this practice alive. And I would be hypocritical if I don't have someone to pass some of the knowledge to. So, we can talk about like preservation, but then if your kids aren't doing it, or you have no kids, or you're not teaching the younger generation, or doing stuff like this, like workshops, then, you're just an artist, or you're then just marking people. You're not in it for the preservation. So I like to have a stretcher. The stretcher, what they do is like they help keep the skin tight and flat. But then they also provide, comfort for the person that is receiving. Sometimes, the stretcher is a family member, which, I like, that happens a lot. But we can't forget about the social aspect of it. And, humans are social. Filipinos are hella social, so it helps. But it's like I would liken it to a tinikling. So with a tinikling, you have multiple parts for things to go right. And, as we're tapping, things are happening. There could be people, around. There could be different sounds. I could have a cramp on my foot or a twitch in my arm, or, stretchers, kind of slipping a bit, or, the person receiving moves a little or sneezes or whatever. And all these little things, make up this tattoo. And this is on me, and you'll see, like, yeah, some of the lines may be thicker or thinner than the others. But to me, that's okay, and that's part of it. It's the aesthetic is natural, because the person that's creating the tools, isn't a perfect human. Like, no matter how good we are making these combs, they're not made by machine, so they're not going to be 100%, quote unquote, straight as like a metal tattoo titanium machine. We are applying it, by an imperfect human, the person that's stretching, an imperfect human, the person that's receiving, the body's not symmetrical, the skin isn't always the same. So, all those little things make up the marks that makes it unique. Even if, like, say, Lane, Natalia, or Piper, or any of us try to recreate this exact thing, it's going to look different because of the tools. And and I'll get to this part right here, where the difference between, like, traditional, like, ceremonial tattooing versus modern Western tattooing is that in Western, it's about the individual self. Like, oh, I got this tattoo because I want to express myself. But in our tradition, it's about the community, not the individual. So I could see someone and say, oh, hey, you got the same tattoo, oh, you're Ilocano, or you're this. Oh, who'd you get that done by? And that has happened a lot too. I could be out at festivals. Like, I saw someone, I was in LA just randomly there, and someone walked up to me or bought something. I saw her hands, and I said, oh, Natalia did that. And they go, oh yeah, oh, you're Kampampangan, and things like that. So it brings out, even though, like, oh, someone might have the same markings on them, but it's still a little bit different, because the tools are different, the experience is different, the environment, but it really is about the community, not the individual. So just to recap, in ceremony, appropriate patterns, hand tapped by handmade tools. But it's also like this is from Piper Abbas. It's about, like, the past, but it's really also about the present, and definitely about the future. But it's a multi-generational practice. And what I like is that with our practice, like, kids are encouraged to be around, as long as they behave, like jumping around or whatever, grabbing the tools. But, it's great to have that as the first experience, because they're going to inherit those stories that we're talking. And that is the important thing. And, they don't have to get tattoos or whatever, but, they're part of that story. So these are, some of the past images over the years. Oh, yeah. Therese, yes, we are talking about children, where children are encouraged, because the children then, will inherit all of this stuff. So it is really about, I like to stress, about community. And I was having a ceremony, and, sometimes karaoke busts out, and I'm fine with that. All right, so some resources before we get to Q&A. These books, obviously, these are all available on Amazon. And that's why I want to focus on availability. The tapping ink, though, it might not be that available. It's expensive because it's from the Philippines. It's out of print. It's like $150, but it's really thick. But these are some books that I recommend to start. And then the thing is, with us, like Boxer Codex, Barangay, Prehistoric Source Material, it's not all about tattooing. Sometimes, like, we buy books just for like a sentence or a paragraph at the most, just to like triangulate. And we buy another book for $50 that's based on like mythology and things like that, So I think that, but these are good general starting points if you want to dig deeper. And then I'll send more in the email if you guys sign up to the newsletter. So here are some folks that also do the same practice as me. So we have Lane, who's in Vegas, Natalia, who is here on the call, in Oahu, Piper, Abbas in Mindanao. Yes, toddlers. I mean, you know, kids. I think kids are good. I like having kids around. And then me, I'm here in the Bay Area. And we all travel pretty much. Piper, not as much, but, you know, Lane, Natalia, and I, we all travel. But I like to say that it's my job is to put myself out of business. And when I say that, like, for example, like earlier in my, when I started like with the script, the bye-bye and stuff, like, I'll tell you this, I used to make like $3,000 a month, like people commissioning me to write people's names a month. That's a lot. And that was like in 2008 to like 2013. But then when I started writing books and doing more talks, then that went down to like $200 a month or whatever. So, and because now like the next generation has that knowledge, then they take what I did and others did, and they can now apply it. So now with this, the tattooing, you know, I would like to see the same thing happen. It is much harder though. You know, as I can say and Natalia will say, that it is much harder than learning the script. But I think that, you know, that should be the goal. Like if someone says they're for the culture, well, then you should ask them, well, how are you putting yourself out of business? You know, how are you making yourself obsolete? How do we normalize this? Right? Like we shouldn't have these gatekeepers. You know, there's good reason to gatekeep, but in general, I think that if it becomes common knowledge and common practice, then, you know, it shouldn't be like, oh, whoa, you got that tattoo. It's like, all right, cool. Everyone has one, right? You know, you see it with some other cultures like Samoans, you know, like they all got their pe'a or whatever. So I think at some point, you know, I would like to see that happen. Okay, so questions. I have a few here.